Who is this year's Josh Jacobs? That's really the big question that's on everybody's minds right now. And considering that Josh Jacobs was the one who was very consistently on fantasy teams that won last year, that should tell us all something. What's very important to remember is that these running backs that turn into league winners are usually later round values. I have identified some running backs that just might be this year's Josh Jacobs. So today I need to get into the running backs with league winning upside in 2023 fantasy football. Now the thing about these guys, it's important to get in on them right now before their value goes up in underdog drafts. So get in on one of these underdog drafts today in Best Ball by using code FFN to get your 100% deposit match up to $100. I am also creating a draft guide to go with it as well, and that will be out in the next coming weeks and a month. So let's get into the guys right here. The number one guy on my list right here is Rhamondre Stevenson of the New England Patriots. Now, Rhamondre is someone not really a late round guy, right? He's not going in the 5th or 6th round. You're getting him in the 3rd round, 4th round at the very latest. I haven't seen him go much in the 4th round. It sometimes does happen though. So just keep that in mind. Not a late round guy, but Rhamondre truly does have upside to be a top 5 running back in 2023. So here's what he did in 2022. So in the 17 games that he was active, he had 12.4 attempts per game, 5 yards per carry, 61.2 yards per game, and 12.6 fantasy points per game. Now, what we can take away from that is that he was absolutely hyper efficient with his work in that backfield. He was their most efficient running back by far, and we'll get into that further in just a minute. So the question that you can also take away from that is, why did he have so few running attempts per game? Well, here's the reason. It's Damien Harris. So Damien Harris is a decent running back. He's a good second fiddle to whoever is the starting running back. I'm not going to deny that. What he did in 2023, 9.6 attempts per game, 4.4 yards per carry, and 7.5 fantasy points per game. So in total, once we stat that out, he took 106 carries away from Rhamondre, 462 rushing yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. So add on top of the fact that Damien Harris actually missed 6 games in 2022. So what would he have done if he had played a full 17-game season like Rhamondre did? This is what he would have done. 163 carries and 714 rushing yards. So what this shows us is 2 things right now. Number 1 is that Rhamondre was and is way more efficient than Damien Harris. It's really not close between the two. And the Patriots wanted to have a more evenly distributed running back volume workload. That's what the Patriots preferred to have last year with Damien Harris. With Rhamondre Stevenson, here's why this is going to change this year. It is going to change because last year, the Patriots didn't even have an offensive coordinator. They had the biggest joke of an offensive coordinator duo in Matt Patricia and Joe Judge. I mean, that is like, it's literally a joke. They had no offensive coordinator. Enter Bill O'Brien. Now, Bill O'Brien has a very good trust level with Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick does not trust many guys in the NFL. Bill O'Brien is in his trust circle, so you can guarantee almost that Bill O'Brien is going to get control of how this offense runs. So remember also that Bill O'Brien was in Houston. He was the Texans head coach for many, many years, the better part of a decade. Here's what happened with Houston. So dating back to Bill O'Brien's time as the Houston Texans head coach, here's what he had to deal with at the running back position. So he got to enjoy one prime year of Arian Foster, in which Arian Foster was excellent that year. And that's what he had to deal with for 1 year. He got 1 year of prime Arian Foster. However, after prime Arian Foster, he had to deal with Alfred Blue as the starting running back. Alfred Blue was not a bad player, but he was nowhere near as good as Rhamondre Stevenson, I'll tell you that. And that's where he had to divide up carries to keep defenses on their toes because Alfred Blue just wasn't good enough to be a 3-down running back. Then he had Lamar Miller for 1 good season. Lamar Miller came into Houston, and that first year, he was good. He was almost a 3-down running back. Now then, in 2017, Houston drafts Deshaun Watson. And what everybody knows is that typically with running quarterbacks, they're not only going to take away carries and rushes from the starting running back, they're also going to take away passing volume from there, because their first instinct, as I have said on many occasions, is not to check the ball down to their running back whenever they face pressure. Their first instinct is to use their own legs and go make a play. So you're getting volume taken from two different angles. And then after Alfred Blue, he had Carlos Hyde. So while it's not that many seasons, Bill O'Brien does have history using a 3-down bell cow. Whenever he had Arian Foster for his prime year, he used Lamar Miller like that for 1 year. He even used Carlos Hyde somewhat like a 3-down guy when Carlos Hyde was there. So now, what happens with Damian Harris now gone? Enter James Robinson. Obviously, we all remember very fondly what James Robinson did in his rookie season with Jacksonville, being an undrafted free agent. And honestly, before he tore his Achilles in year 2, he was still a very good player that year. So there was a lot to like about James Robinson pre-Achilles tear. Here's the problem though. Since he tore his Achilles and since he returned from the injury, there's two things that are a problem right here. Number one, we haven't seen him get that same level of carries and that same workload since he returned. So we don't even know if he can handle it. And based on what I'm about to tell you right now, that would indicate he probably isn't going to be able to handle it moving forward. When we did see him, his efficiency actually dropped from 4.7 yards per carry in 2021 to 4.2 yards per carry in the 7 games that he played with Jacksonville last year. Now, instead of 1 touchdown on every 20.5 carries that he had in 2021, he plummeted down to 1 touchdown on every 36.7 carries in 2022. I mean, that is like a serious level of efficiency drop. So usually what happens in that situation where the running back gets less volume is they actually become more efficient. That didn't happen for James Robinson. He became less efficient. And then when he got traded to the New York Jets, his efficiency plummeted to 2.9 yards per carry. What is James Robinson now? Is he done for? A lot of statistics would indicate that he's probably done for. So with Rhamondre Stevenson, even with Damian taking all that he took last year, Rhamondre Stevenson still finished as the running back 11 in half PPR. And the reason for that is because of his pass catching upside. In 2022, he averaged 5.2 targets per game and 6.1 yards per reception. Here's what he has. He's got Mac Jones at quarterback, and compared to running quarterbacks, like I said, taking volume from not only the rushes, but also the pass volume as well, Mac Jones is a pure old school pocket passer. Those guys are much more willing to pass the ball and check the ball down to their running backs. So that's not going to change here for Rhamondre Stevenson. And here's the thing. I don't think Bill O'Brien has really had a running back as good as Rhamondre Stevenson since Arian Foster. That's the reality here. So if James Robinson is truly done and Rhamondre gets even 40 more carries this year, he's going to hold his receiving upside. So if he gets 40 more carries, Rhamondre absolutely can be a league-winning running back in 2023 fantasy football. Remember, he's going in the 3rd or 4th round as the running back 10 off the board. Make sure you get in on Rhamondre Stevenson because he absolutely has league-winning potential. Moving on to our next guy here, it is Travis Etienne of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So here's the thing. I've really actually struggled with Travis Etienne this offseason. There's a couple of different reasons why. So first of all, I love the player. I absolutely love Travis Etienne. I loved him coming out of college. And what he did last year, I loved what he did in moments last year. In Dynasty Fantasy Football, I actually have Travis Etienne ranked as a top 6 running back in Dynasty. And like I said, at times last year, Etienne was very key in some of my team's fantasy success in moments last year. But at the same time, when it was all said and done, we all kind of came away disappointed with Travis Etienne a little bit. In 2022, he averaged 12.9 attempts per game, 5.1 yards per carry, 66.2 yards per game, and 11 fantasy points per game. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take out his Week 12 game versus Baltimore. He left that game very, very early with a foot injury and did not return. So with that being adjusted, now down to 16 games in one season, here's what he did adjusted. 13.6 attempts per game, 5.1 yards per carry, 70.1 yards per game, and 11.7 fantasy points per game. So when you stack it up, very, very similar to Rhamondre Stevenson, actually better in a lot of categories. And he had a similar situation too. Early in the season, James Robinson took 81 carries and 340 yards in 7 games from Travis Etienne. That came out to 11.6 attempts per game and 48.6 yards per game. So Robinson was absolutely vulturing carries and total volume away from Travis Etienne in the earlier part of the season. But something interesting happened. In James Robinson's last few games with Jacksonville, Travis Etienne was starting to emerge. Now keep in mind, Travis Etienne was basically a rookie last year. His rookie year was completely taken away from him by a Lisfranc foot injury. So he was basically a rookie last year. Now, once Travis Etienne started to emerge, that's when Jacksonville felt comfortable enough to ship off a less efficient James Robinson for a more efficient Travis Etienne. And then I found something very, very telling. So one of the narratives that I've seen from people on Travis Etienne over the offseason is that when you look at how many carries that he averaged on his season, the percentage of carries that he had on his total team was very, very low. So I wanted to break it down to a very, very minimal level to where we could really identify what actually happened. What I found was very, very telling. So when James Robinson was there, that was weeks 1 through 7. Travis Etienne received 44% of the team's running back carries. So less than 50% is not a good number. That's not really running back one volume. Here's what happened. That number started to creep up starting week 5 against the Houston Texans. So then, like I said, Jacksonville ships James Robinson out of the building. James Robinson gone now. From then on, weeks 8 through 18, Travis Etienne handled 72% of the team's running back carries from weeks 8 through 18. That is massive. That tells us all something very, very, very important. Jacksonville recognized how great Travis Etienne was, and they wanted him full time. They wanted more of that. So exit James Robinson and enter Tank Bigsby, the team's 3rd round pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. A player that I like. I actually really like Tank Bigsby. Those of you who watch my Dynasty content know that I really couldn't get his freshman season at Auburn out of my head when I was scouting Tank Bigsby as a Dynasty player. So he's probably going to get some work to some extent in Jacksonville. But it is going to be as a backup / spell back. And here's why. Here's why he's not going to vulture carries and volume away like James Robinson did. So with Travis Etienne's hyper efficiency that Jacksonville, to their credit, recognized by midseason, and the fact that they were very, very competitive in the AFC this year, they were a touchdown away from beating the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC divisional round. Do you think this team wants to change what worked so well for them down a very important stretch after they started out 2-6? Do you think that they want to change what worked so well for them? This team drafted Tank Bigsby because they needed quality depth. That's very important to have in the NFL, especially at the running back position. When it comes to Travis Etienne's receiving work, here's what I will say. I think we're all very disappointed in what he did in 2023. Considering the fact that he's a very good receiving back that we saw at Clemson, what he did in 2022 was very disappointing. He averaged 2.8 targets a game and 9 yards per reception. So he may not get much more receiving volume if he gets any more at all in 2023. But I want to make this argument right here for that. So if Jacksonville was smart enough to see how efficient Travis Etienne became before James Robinson got shipped off, to the point where they felt so comfortable handing him 72% of their carries from weeks 8 through 18, maybe, just maybe, would they let him see more targets in 2023 since he was so efficient with those targets at 9 yards per reception? That is very, very efficient from a running back perspective. We obviously want this to happen. I'm not as convinced of that, but I will tell you this. Even if Travis Etienne's receiving volume stays the same, he is likely going to receive 50 to 60 more carries at the very minimum. And when you factor in his efficiency and his second-year development and his running back 12 price on Underdog currently going in the 4th round, Travis Etienne absolutely has league-winning upside in 2023 fantasy football. Moving on to our next guy on the list, it is Alexander Mattison of the Minnesota Vikings. So let me say this right off the bat. Alexander Mattison is high risk. There's no doubt about that. Dalvin Cook is still on this roster. There's no guarantee that Alexander Mattison is the running back 1. If Dalvin Cook ends up staying, Mattison is going to be the same guy that he's always been, which is a backup running back who, when Dalvin Cook goes down, we know immediately that Alexander Mattison will be a running back 1 in fantasy football. So he's one of the highest upside backup running backs in the league. The best handcuff running back to have, both in redraft and in dynasty. And this is part of what makes him such a high reward fantasy player this year. So here's the thing. Out of any veteran running back this offseason, the one who consistently is getting more and more buzz about them being moved or even cut this offseason is Dalvin Cook. It will just not go away, and Minnesota clearly does not want him on the team. They want to move off of Dalvin Cook. So in comparison, the Joe Mixon rumors about him getting cut or traded, those have largely died off. Even Alvin Kamara and his looming suspension, that news is pretty dead right now. But Dalvin Cook's buzz will not go away. Now, as I already said, we already know what Alexander Mattison has done and can do without Dalvin Cook there. Alexander Mattison is a true running back 1, and Minnesota views him as that too. This feels like a situation where Minnesota is trying really, really hard to ship away Dalvin Cook so Alexander Mattison can be their guy. And that's what makes this such a high reward move. He's the running back 24 on Underdog right now. And by the way, that price is rising. And imagine what happens when Dalvin Cook does get moved if it happens. His price will absolutely skyrocket. That's why it's important to get him right now. Get him today in an Underdog draft and use code FFN for your 100% deposit match. If you want him as a steal, you need to act today because he absolutely has league-winning upside in 2023 fantasy football. Let me know what you think of these guys in the comments below, and make sure to like the video if you got value from it, and subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And if you want to see the wide receivers with league-winning upside in 2023, click on this video right here.